Okay.
I think we are live.
Yes. Good evening. Good evening in Barcelona, and good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. So this is the fourth webinar of the facilities management module, and the idea of today it is to review the content and especially basically the activities of phase 2, activity number 3, and activity number 4. Just in case you have any doubts or any comments in relation to the things to be done in these two activities. And then the second part of the webinar, it is to go a little bit more in depth in relation to the public-private management models that exist and that apply, I would say, all over the world today. Yeah. So before we go into this, some sort of more theoretical or applied contents, I would like to know if you guys have any question or any doubts in relation to activities 3 and activity 4. Lisan or Dragomir.
I do not have.
At the moment, I haven't.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
Just a few.
Sorry. If you don't mind, Jordi, and maybe you already wanted to say it, but there are definitely some guys that had some doubts. So especially the activity 4. I think like the same that we were doing in the Spanish version, it could be very refreshing and helpful for the other guys that will be watching it later. So if you could just resume it or conclude it very briefly, I think they will appreciate it.
Definitely, yeah. So let's explain a bit what it is expected in activity number 4, which is an activity that it is expected to be done in groups, but obviously that some of you are doing it individually, and therefore there's obviously a little bit more of some sort of workload. Yeah, but it is quite straightforward, and it should be that much of work in this activity. Yeah, probably the next one in the next phase it's different, but not now. So what it is expected here, basically, here what we do have, it is a private company that is managing a public facility, a gym, a fitness center, and they had some trouble years, and they decided to change the general manager, and they hired a new manager called Anna, who's going to take in charge of the new management. This is a real situation, a real experience that I lived, and obviously with the names changed, but everything it is real. So in this context, what Anna is supposed to do, and it is what is expected in this activity, it is to kind of very quickly develop some sort of a process of analysis, diagnostic, and some proposals, strategic proposals, some ideas to reverse the situation and to turn into profit something that it's now generating a lot of losses. Yes. So the first part of the activity, as you see, it's only a 4-page activity, so it's quite and one of these pages is the profit and loss account. So the first part, it is basically to develop these ideas, these strategic ideas that have to be supported by this analysis and diagnostic, previous analysis and diagnostic. And then the second part, and that's probably the interesting part, not to leave that in this theoretical and abstract point of view of these strategies and so on, but to make sure that this goes to the earth and we realize and we adapt to specific actions. What I'm asking you is, based on these strategies, to develop, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 10 specific actions where obviously out of these strategies, where they should be sufficiently specific to be adapted to this profit and loss account. Yeah. So when I decide to, I don't know, to develop a campaign to target some segments of customers to increase number of membership, obviously this will have an impact on the income statement in terms of the income that it's going to have on membership fees, but also at the same time on the expenses side, obviously that's going to have an impact probably on marketing or on publicity or on whatever it has within the expenses account. Yeah. So this is the idea. Obviously, it is difficult to see or to learn if this marketing campaign is going to cost 1,000 or it's going to cost 500, you know, but that's not the point of the activity. Obviously, I'm not asking you to go into the market and ask how much it could cost a marketing campaign to do this or to do that at all. Yeah. So what I'm only thinking here, it is to make sure that the actions you suggest are sufficiently specific to be analyzed from the economic point of view. Yeah. So apart from that, what's gonna allow us to have this activity? Finally, we're gonna have a profit or a loss at the end of the day. Yeah. So what I want to see as well, it is for year 2017, 2018, and 2019, for the next 3 coming years. What I would like to see if you are suggesting a plan where it's generating profitability right on the first year, or maybe you are suggesting a plan where maybe there's 1 year or 1 or 2 years that you are recovering the situation, and then by the end of the third year, you're going to have, let's say, an important profit margin. Yeah, that's no strategy here, but you have to mix between credibility in front of the owners of the company, and on the other way, on the other side, what you have to do it is to make sure that you don't suggest a recovery that it's too slow, that it's not satisfying the stakeholders, the shareholder needs. Yeah, so this is the idea. For all these items that you are not suggesting anything, for instance, taxes, I understand that you are not going to suggest any sort of initiative or action to pay less taxes. So in this line of taxes that it is 24,756 euros in 2016, obviously for the coming years 17, 18, and 19, you'll have the same amount of money, because since you are not suggesting anything, you just leave the same amount. Yes, you have at the campus, you have the Excel sheet, obviously not to prepare all the template, so you have only to enter the different numbers and to with this profitable or loss result for each of the 3 coming years. This would be the idea. So I insist, I'm not going to analyze if the ideas you are suggesting are really credible in terms of the cost that it generates or the income that it may generate, but obviously you have to have some sort of credibility. But the final or the main objective, it is first to do some details of the action suggested, to set some details on these actions suggested, and second, to make sure that at the end of the day you'll have a profit or a loss, and let's see how you think it should be to present to the shareholders of the company. Yeah, this is basically the idea. Yeah. Listen, and Dragomir, I understand that you had no questions, but if when you start doing that, you find out that there's something it's not really clear to you, just send us an email, Lucas or me, and we'll quickly answer that, and we'll go through. Yeah. Sure. As I said in previous,
we should do this with all the team. Yes.
Yes. Yes. That's a team activity. So you let's say share the tasks no matter how. I mean, maybe there's going to be a team that is going to develop the first part of 1 or 2 persons, and the other part, let's say the strategic part, 1 or 2 persons, and the operational part, not the others. Or maybe you just develop on some actions in income on one side and on expenses on the other side. So it's up to you. I mean, I don't mind how you, let's say, share the tasks.
It's very important to communicate properly. So it's like establish proper communication channels and speak like being in a frequent contact, because if not, it's very difficult to organize yourself. That's one thing. And once you will submit it, there is no need to all of you will submit the final document, just one member of the group. However, it's very important that all of the names will be on the final in the final activity. So Jordi will know that who were the members of the group.
Yeah, that's very important, because as you know, since there are some people that has been assigned to a group, let's say randomly, it is important that the activity has the names that people who has participated. Because maybe you are in a group where someone else that you don't even know is in the group, he has not or she has not participated in at all. But then if I don't know it, I will mark as well to him or to her. Yeah. as just to finalize this part, as I always said, and right in the beginning, I understand that this is a period of the year that many of places in the world, they are on holidays or they are starting holidays. So I'd rather prefer to have a good developed activity and 2 weeks late, rather than have a very, let's say, quickly done and rapidly done activity done on time. Yeah, so obviously the best scenario would be a very well developed activity on time. Yeah, but I prefer to that, because I prefer the first option, because I understand that these activities are an important element of the module to learn and to develop the learning process. So it's important to go through and, let's say, calm then when you have time and plenty of time to think about it, rather than to go through because that's a deadline on Sunday and I want to finish that before the deadline is on. Yeah. So again, any questions, just come back to us and we'll go through. Yeah. Okay. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to go through the second part of the webinar, which is an important element in relation to management of sports facilities. That there's some sort of relation between public and the private sector. Yeah, so it's what we call the management models. I'm going to share a screen with you. Although it doesn't allow me to show the whole screen, so I'm going to share only this screen. Yes, you see here. So we're going to talk for a minute about the management models in a sport facility. Yeah, and just a minute. Because when I do it like this, I have to. Now you can see the screen again, my screen again. Yeah. So
properly.
If someone has any doubts, just interrupt me, because obviously when I'm sharing a screen, I cannot see you. So what we're talking about is about these public-private partnership models that go in a range from direct management to indirect management. As I said, by direct management, we understand a public facility that is managed by the local authority or by the government. Listen, you are in Toronto, and Canada has a long tradition of public-private partnership. Probably is one of the top countries in the world that understands let's say, the good parts of public-private partnership in sport, obviously. Yeah. So it's very interesting to understand that these PPP, these public-private partnerships that are taking place in the world of sport, they are developing very fast all over the world, and it's probably one of the most important elements that will be taken into account, not only in managing sports facilities, but also in services, in sporting services and activities in the coming years. Yeah. So what we're going to see here now, it is that between this black, which is, or this white, which is direct management, as I say, a public facility managed by the public administration, to this black, which would be, let's say, a publicly owned land that it has a sports facility on it, that it's completely privately managed. We have some sort of a large range of grays that go between this white and black, that they have a lot of elements to take into account. Yeah. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, but I have to do it like this, unfortunately. Yeah, so here you can see my screen again. Here it is what I'm saying. Yeah, between this direct and indirect management, we have let's say, some grays, and these grays are related to the level of involvement of the private sector. Yeah, so we can see on one side, on the left side, a very low level of involvement, which would be what the so-called use agreement, to the highest level of involvement of the private sector, which would be even a disinvestment in public assets. Yes, let's go through the ones that they really apply to the sports sector, which are the first four. Yes, here what we can see it is that the first one, the level of involvement of private sector, is quite low. It's this use agreement. Yeah, we will find that in many sport pitches all over the world where, I don't know, I'm in a local authority that I have a sports field, a football field, for instance, and I have 3 football clubs in my city. And obviously this sports field needs to be shared by these 3 clubs. Yeah. So I write a usage agreement between these among these 3 clubs, and the use agreement states, well, which are the dates and the timetable that is going to be used for each of the clubs when using the sports facility. Yeah, obviously it will say that probably there are no charges to use this field because I'm a non-for-profit organization that I'm just looking after developing football, educating kids, and so on and so on. Yeah, but at the same time, this usage agreement will also say that you as a club, in your let's say hours that you can use the field, you cannot organize there I don't know, a commercial league and generate some profit to the club or benefit to the club, because this is not under the object of the main object of your club. Yeah, so it has to strict to the elements that they are basic in your functioning of the club. Yeah, this would be a use agreement. Then we could move on to a management contract where here maybe this same club or maybe even a specialized sports services company, what they do, it is well, establish obviously a contract where there's going to be some duties and some rights on each side. Yeah, and probably here, even this club that it's looking to develop football and to educate kids and so on, they can also foresee or expect some profitability in this management contract. Yeah, so here it would be allowed that this football club, just to make sure that they balance they account numbers, they just basically organize a kind of a recreational league or a commercial league, but this could be done in this management contract, whereas it could not be done in this use agreement that we said before. Yeah. From then on, we could move into the leases agreements or contracts, where this is quite common, even in the hyper-professionalized sport as football, where we can find football clubs. For instance, probably you know San Siro in Italy, which is a football field owned by the local authority, where over there they play Milan, AC Milan, and also Inter Milan. So, sorry?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No. Dragomir? I'm not sure.
I cannot hear you.
Okay. Well, you just interrupt me if there's something. I couldn't, Dragomir, I couldn't get you.
Me neither. Maybe try to type it if you have a question.
No. All is clear. We know this stadium that.
Okay.
Milan, AC Milan share between.
Exactly. So I'm going to go back to the slide. So that's a very good example, but there are many examples all over Europe and probably all over the world, even in not only in soccer or football, but also in other professional sports, where you may find 1 or 2 clubs that they are sharing a football field. Yeah, this would be a lease. Yeah, maybe some of you can say, well, what's the difference between a lease and a use agreement, for instance, and why this difference? The difference between a lease and the use agreement, it is that the lease or the leasing, what happens, it is that this club has the total right of the use of that space during the lease contract. Yeah, so this means that, for instance, San Siro, over there can only happen 2 things: a game of AC Milan or a game of Inter Milan. But nothing else may happen, obviously, apart from some exceptions of, I don't know, a concert or whatever. But these are the main and basically activities. Yeah, this is common, and this is let's say easy to justify for a stadium like San Siro, but it would be very difficult to justify for a public local authority sports facility, because if you are hiring a specific public sports facility to a specific club, what happens it is that people that is not belonging to that club cannot use that sports facility. And obviously, since it is a public investment, it needs to make sure that this public investment goes to the total, the entire community, not only to a few of them. Yeah. So these leasing contracts are difficult to be seen in the sports industry, apart from these hyper-professional sports clubs that they are still using, not their own facilities, but the facilities of the local authority. Yeah. I insist, when we go to the local communities, when we go to the amateur sport or even the fitness conditioning, well, we will find these other sort of contracts and not this leasing, because they are, let's say, prohibiting the use of this facility to people who's not member of that organization, and that's not really parallel to public service. Yeah.
Professor,
sure.
Quick question. How about, for example, in Canada, we have a lot of sport facilities, but within them they would have a variety of sports or activities, and they usually they give those the management out to a private sector. Does that gets included in what we're discussing right now, like sharing of a stadium that's being built by a municipality? Is that the same thing?
Yes, probably it would fall under these management contracts, as I will explain now, or in these administrative concessions. Yes. Okay. So when that's, as you say, let's say a variety of sports facilities or sports practices that is being managed by only one company. Yeah. What we should look at it is if this management, let's say the potential profitability of the management of this sports facility, if this risk in profitability or loss, it's on the public administration or it's on the private company. Probably in Canada, most of the times it's going to go onto the private company. So let's say there's a contract between the private company and the public administration, the local authority. And if this facility generates some profitability, this profitability is on the company. But on the other hand, if this management generates losses, the private company will have to support these losses. Yeah.
What if it doesn't make it doesn't generate any profit? It is out there built by the municipality or the city to provide, facility services that have gyms and all kind of sports. They're not made to generate profit, but to serve a need. And then is that?
Yeah, then would be a use agreement. There would be the first part where the municipality has built that. Obviously, it's not expecting any return to the investment, obviously. And what is being done is just to generate some public services, but they decide not to offer it themselves, but to offer it via a non-for-profit or even a profit organization. Yeah? So this would be a use agreement. Yeah, but there's no economic transaction here, and therefore there is no economic risk in the management of the facility. I understand. Yeah. So the important thing here, it is when we see between, let's say, this direct or indirect management, it is when we move from these first three, use agreement, management contracts, or leases, to the administrative concessions. When we go into administrative concession, here, the most important element is that the economic risk in the management of the facility or the assets are on the private company. So this means that if I'm managing that facility and it generates profit, I'm going to keep this profit for me as a company. But if it generates losses, I will have to support and provide money to balance the income account, the profit and loss account. Yeah. So these administrative concessions, which is something that it's quite common also in other, sometimes in railways or in highways or motorways, you can find this some sort of model. It is a little bit more complex in the sports industry. Yeah. But here it is, let's say, a clear line between direct management and indirect management. When we talk about indirect management, I will have a company, I will face the risk, the economic risk of having profitability or not. And obviously, I assume that risk, and it can be a profitable business or it can be a non-profitable business as in any other sector. Yeah. So when we talk about these administrative concessions, well, we have finally two more elements where the level of involvement of private sector is very high, which is a joint venture and this disinvestment in public assets. but it is not really common, and it is not really common in the sports industry. Yeah. So if we focus for a minute in administrative concessions, you can see that there are three models: design, construction, management, and transfer. These are the 4 steps we may find in any, let's say, life cycle of a sports facility. At the end of the day, there's always this T of transfer, because what the law says, I would say all over the world, it is that even if it's a sports facility that it's being 100% invested by a private company, if it's in a public land and it's in a administrative concession agreement, at the end of the day, after 20 years, after 50 years, after no matter how many years the contract says, this facility is going to belong to the local authority or to the government, let's say to the public administration. Yeah. So at the end of the day, there's going to be always this T of transfer of the asset from the private to the public sector. And that's important, because sometimes you may find a facility that it's being managed by a company during, I don't know, 20, 25 years. That has happened in Barcelona. And after 25 years, that facility is almost, many things are not working well, and so on and so on. And the local authority says, well, you have to transfer me this facility, but you must transfer it in a, let's say, appropriate functioning way. Yeah, you cannot transfer me that I will have to invest there so many millions of euros before it gets to a quality standard required. Yeah, so this teach it's not minor. Before that, we may find administrative concessions where there's design, construction, and management, where there's only construction and management, or where there's management. So we may find a contract, an administrative concession, where the design is being let's say produced, let's say that the design of the sports facility is being determined by the company. So the company will hire some architects and they will design the facility. They will hire a construction company to construct the facility itself. And finally, since they are a management company, they will manage the facility during, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. Yeah. This would be the biggest, let's say, model, or the largest in scope model. We would have also an administrative concession where the design of the facility, let's say the architects are being hired by the public authority, by the public administration. So therefore, they guarantee that the design is the way that they want and not the way that the company wants. Yeah. For instance, if we're talking about swimming pools, maybe a swimming pool for learning, it doesn't need to have 25 meters long, but if there's a private company that it's a sports club, it's a sports club that is building this facility and it's a swimming club, obviously they will want a 25 meters long swimming pool because they want to do their training and their competitions over there. Yeah. So the design is not, it is also very important, and it will depend on the let's say the philosophy that the public administration has behind that project, that it will let the design do it by the private company, or they will take care by themselves. Yeah. After the design, it comes to the construction, yeah, which is the building of the facility. That hasn't many secrets. There are obviously constructing companies that they develop the project. And finally, we have the management, which is obviously the most important part, because the design may take 6 months, the construction may take 18 months, but you are going to manage that for 20, 30 or 50 years. So definitely the management of the sports facility as a service oriented industry, it's the most important one. Yeah. So we have to focus on the management, even if we, let's say, launch a contract where there's a design, construction, management, and transfer. Yeah. There has been some bad experiences by local authorities that since these sports facilities, I don't know, fitness centers with swimming pools and fitness areas and so on, maybe it's a 5 million euros investment. We've seen some experiences where, especially during the crisis, that constructing companies, they were really interested and keen on obtaining a contract, a 5 million euro contract to develop a sports facility. But obviously they had no idea of how to manage that. So their focus was on getting the project to build it. But then when it comes into managing this sports facility for the next 10, 20 years, there's no interest on that. So that's going to have a problem at the end of the day by the local authority. Yeah. So the management part, it is the most important one. Yeah. Let me go to the last slide. When I explain a little bit which are the situations. Yeah, we are here. Yeah, I'm going up to the end. We've seen these four main models, which is use agreement, management contracts, leases, and administrative concessions. And basically, here we can see that some sort the typical organizations that they are taking place in each of these contracts. Yeah. So for use agreements, that usually there is no, as Listen said, economic transaction. Usually there are non-for-profit organizations. It can be sports clubs or other sort of associations that they are making an agreement with the local authority to provide some services over there. Yeah, that would be a use agreement, and it's a very low level of involvement between this organization and the public sector. I have a box, I have a facility over there, and I provide some services or some activities for my, let's say, clients, to put it in a way, or my members or whatever, and that's it. Yeah. And probably there's going to be other sports organizations that they are going to use that box, that facility, for other purposes. Yeah. Then we have management contracts. These management contracts are with, we can be with the sports clubs or non-for-profit organizations as before, but also here specialized sporting services companies come into play. And they usually look at that as a way of generating activity for their company. Yeah, I insist, the economic risk here is still on the public administration. So this means that I don't know, I'm managing an outdoor summer swimming pool. Yeah, and I am providing there some lifeguards. So if there's a summer that it's a really rainy summer and there's not much people going there, me as a company, I'm not going to have any problems because I'm just going to, let's say, put some lifeguards there and get the money back be paid by the local authority because I have put the lifeguards over there. So it's going to be the local authority that obviously they're going to generate some losses because that summer, that swimming pool was not really with a high demand because of the weather. Or on the other way around, maybe that's a very hot summer, like I think it's the one this year everywhere. And what it may happen, it is that there's a lot of demand, and me as a company, I just provided the lifeguards, but that's going to generate a lot of profitability in that facility that it's going to go into the local authority. Yeah, this would be the management contracts where the economic risk of the management of the activity is on the public administration. Then we talk about leases. As we said, we can find that in some specific professional sports clubs, but it's difficult to find in many other places because you are, let's say, how you say, you are not allowing everybody go into there, but just the people who has leased that facility. And taking into account that that is a public facility, this is very difficult to explain to the citizenship to say, no, I have this sports facility, but it's only being used by this sports club. It only makes sense when we talk about professional sport, where there's a lot of spectators that go to the field and so on. Yeah. And then we move on to the indirect management, which is these administrative concessions. And here, usually what we can find is a little bit larger management companies where you may find an investment that is done 100% from the public side, 100% from the private side, or even it can be a mixed investment structure. So X% on the public side and X% on the private side. Obviously, at the end of the day, the private company will look at the investment has been done, the number of years of the contract, and obviously they have to have a return on this investment. If not, they wouldn't go into this public tender. Yeah, so it is important here to make sure that the public administration has a correct and in-depth feasibility study to make sure that when I launch this project for the different companies to bid, they are interested in bidding because they generate profit for them. If not, obviously that would not be an interesting project. Yeah. So this is a little bit the ideas behind this direct and indirect management. And I believe that, well, without falling into stereotypes, but probably in countries such as Moldova, for instance, these public-private partnerships are getting a lot of interest in the coming years. Yeah, because there are countries that they have a lot of let's say needs as any other country, but probably in a sport, a way of accelerating the investment in the sports facilities, it is together with the private sector. Yeah, and the only role that the public, also in Africa, obviously, and the only role that the public sector needs to have, it is to make sure that in this contract they set the rules and regulations of what this private company can do. Yeah, so me as a public administration, I'm not going to manage the sport. What I'm going to do is I'm going to promote that things happen in the world of sport. Yeah, and I'm going to promote that these things happen in the way that I want to, because I'm the public administration. I'm looking for the entire community, for the entire citizenship. Yeah, but at the end of the day, I have a lot of let's say needs, and I have a lot of investments to be done. And there are going to be some investments that they are not profitable, for instance, schools, hospitals, roads, and so on. And obviously, these investments are priority to any sport facility investment, because we all are in the sports industry, but we will agree that probably education and health, they are more important than sport, no matter which sort of sport. Yeah. So when we have to prioritize investment in the public sector, it is very important to make sure that all those that they are not primary investments or primary of interest, probably private sector can support. The most important thing is to make sure that we, as a public administration, make sure that we set the rules to make sure that the private does what we want them to do, and not they do what they want, because then it becomes a private project which is not of public interest. Well, I'm not sure if it's been clear and the ideas behind these management models, because I believe that this is one of the elements that are going to have a lot of importance in Europe and in many places in the world in the coming years, because resources are scarce. And when it comes into developing these high demand sporting services, public sector and private companies and private organizations, even non-for-profit organizations, need to go together to make sure that we cover the demands of the population. Any doubts or any comments in relation to this?
I'm pretty clear.
For me, all is clear, Jordi. Just as a comment, in SUTIP, yes, Europe, let's say it's not very safe to deal with the public administration, because, for example, you can make the investment and base it on the contract, and after 1 or 2 years, you can lose the, let's say, rent of the land, for example, because of corruption.
That's what I was going to say. That well, you know that in Spain we are quite good as well in corruption. So I understand that when it comes into corruption in many, not in Canada, obviously, which is one of the, let's say, nicest countries. Surprisingly, but if you go to Africa, probably it happens the same, because I experienced something in Gambia, and it was very, very disgusting, to put it in a way. So I agree. But what I want to think is that this is gonna, at the end of the day, progressively go down. Let's say that corruption will go down, should go down. And that gives a lot of much more law security. Rules and regulations are becoming more secure. But I agree, when there's corruption behind, it's a problem. What I've seen in some countries in Latin America, where corruption was very strong as well, it is that when these, let's say, international organizations such as the World Bank or the Interdevelopment Bank for Latin America, where this some sort of global organizations, they have set some sort of rules and regulations that they are very clear and very transparent, and they force governments to make sure that they follow these rules. Yeah. So if there's a project in Colombia that is being paid partially by the World Bank, for sure, I will think that there's not going to be corruption in it, because everything today goes electronically, goes really transparent, and at least I don't want to seem like a lot of very like naive, yeah. But but I want to think, and I need to think that things are becoming better. Having said that, I understand that in some sort of situations, and especially in professional sport, these things still happen, unfortunately, and well, it is us that we need to step by step change the situation, definitely.
Yeah, you said it right now. The idea is to educate people and to prepare people for this, because it's like more people that will be prepared, maybe less corruption, but obviously it's a long run. It will take time.
I did a master's in corruption when I developed the National School of Sport Strategy for Saudi Arabia. And the day after we signed the contract, the day after, so we had some rights, but also some duties to develop. I had a line of people in front of my office in Saudi Arabia asking for so many things that said, well, this is not in the contract, this is not in the contract. And at the end of the day, the sport director of the Ministry of Education came to me and said, look, if you start saying no to everything what they are requesting, you're going to have a problem in this country. So unfortunately, that happens, but well, it's difficult. But at the end of the day, you have to try to balance in order to progressively get rid of that, definitely, because that's one of the elements that generate more poverty all over the world, much more than basic materials and trades and so on, definitely.
Fully agree.
So, well, I hope it's not been too much idealistic, and at least there are some tools to go through, and there's a lot of literature, probably not that much in sport specific, but yes, in overall public-private partnership. But sometimes when we go into sport, there are some elements that need to be taken into account, that they are very different of these macro infrastructures of airports or harbors or roads and so on. That obviously there's a collaboration between the private and the public sector, but it is not exactly the same way as the sports work are developed, definitely.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
In certain part of this country, private companies would build facilities for certain towns, and then they will have basically give it to to that small town, and the small town basically runs that place. Where do I like? It's just something that just came to my mind, and I'm trying to fit it into these models. It's pretty much not only the other way around, but again, money has been spent by a private sector, building a facility, and then they just give it up, and they just keep the name. For example, Suncor Sport Facility, Suncor being the company's name, and now everything within it is run by the municipality. Even the hiring process, where do I fit this?
What I would say here is that yes, I didn't mention that it's kind of two very different steps. One step, it is the private company that makes the investment and puts the name and so on, and maybe one for social responsibility projects or whatever. And that's the first step, and then it becomes on the hands and on the ownership of the local authority or municipality. That begins here. When I have this facility already built, owned by the municipality has to start thinking of what we have said before in this webinar, which is, okay, now I'm a municipality. I have, no matter who has given me the money, but I have a sports facility. Now I have to decide if I want to run it directly, which is with my, let's say, sport instructor and so on, which is not really common at all, or I'm going to hire a company that's going to manage this sports facility that, despite it's being invested by a company, it's mine. So I'm going to get the profitable or not, or the elements good and bad of that. So it's from this starting point that I start going through this process of direct and indirect management. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, so well, happy to see you, and thank you for being here, and we'll keep in touch. And as I said, if you have any troubles with the activities, just contact us. We'll organize a next webinar next week, basically or focused on explaining a little bit the contents of phase 3 and also the activity number 5, which is an important activity, as I said in the kickoff webinar. So you cannot attend, just go through the webinar. It's going to be probably a shorter webinar where we're going to go and explain a little bit in detail this activity number 5, which I believe it's quite interesting, and it's the only one activity, if I'm not wrong, of phase 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Correct.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And have a good day or a good evening.
All right, you as well.
Oh,
Thank you.
all the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Ciao.